How long should a player train per day, whether it's youth or professional? There are slight differences, but I'm going to dive into these from a general standpoint based on my experience. Now, who am I? I'm Kyle C. Wilson, Kyle Wilson, also known as the Angry Soccer Guy. Now, if you don't know who I am, I have 10 years working with children from the ages of 2 up to professional football players. So guys that have played in the MLS, guys that have played in Europe. Some quick examples would be Luis Nani, that has played for Manchester United and won the Premier League and the Champions League. I've trained Dom Dwyer, Benji Michel, Ruan Teixeira, a bunch of other professional players. List goes on. And then I've also trained the generational talent coming out of Brazil named Cauã Bazil, who is worth $3.5 million from Nike, or has a contract with Nike. Now, I will add, I don't have every single answer, but I will share my experience based on how much should a player train per day. So overall, a player should train in a team environment 2 hours per day, maximum, at high intensity. In a group session, so like 2 to 6 players, it should be an hour and a half at high intensity. In a one-to-one session, 45 minutes, high intensity, based on my experience. Now, if you want to talk about things like double sessions and other aspects we'll get into, but I want to dive into these a little bit more just to explain on a greater scale how this works, why it works. Okay, now, if we think about players, you think about their maximum capacity, whether it's a young child, so let's say a 10-year-old or professional player. From a team environment, if we're going to have a full training session, hard, strong, tough, whatever word you want to use to describe it, it's a full session. More than 2 hours is a big reach. Typically, a professional training session is an hour to 2 hours. There may be some examples of it stretching that, but it's typically 2 hours, up to 2 hours on a field. They'll do stuff like gym work, recovery, video work, right? That's all part of training, but that's not on the field. Okay, just to make sure that's clear. We look at group sessions. People always ask for groups. And I've done, just for reference, I've done teams, I've done groups, I've done individual sessions, I've done everything in between. And when I've done professional players, it's been one-to-one and group. I have not done team training, but I have been around team environments. And if we're going to look at the group perspective for a second, you're going to talk about 2 to 6 players. It does not need to be more than an hour and a half if the intensity is right. If the intensity is right and the players are pushing themselves, then you can knock that out in an hour and a half. Get in, get out, and be done. Right? That's the standard that should be set. Get in, get out, get done. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about one-to-one, 45 minutes, max, at high intensity. Now, if we're talking about like mid to low intensity, you can change the time frames. But the thing is, a player can only give so much energy before the performance level drops, and then the output that you're looking for will start significantly decreasing, which is a huge miss. So let's look at one-to-one for a second. 45 minutes. And I'm going to give you a personal example. This past week, Christmas week, 2024, I have trained a professional player named Benji Michel, who has played for Orlando City, Aroca, which is in the Superliga in Portugal, and then he's currently at Real Salt Lake. We were training this week. Monday, 35-minute session, one-to-one. Christmas Day, we had a training session Christmas Day, 8 o'clock in the morning, 40 minutes. So Monday, 35 minutes. Yesterday, 40 minutes. Professional player. We're talking about it. And we were having a conversation. I said, for example, parents want an hour session. They want their child to go through the whole hour. And I'm like, the number of times that a child gets to say 30 minutes or 35 minutes and they're gassing because they don't have the output anymore. But the parents push it, hey, get back in there. It's because they're paying for it. But at his level, at a professional level, he's like, look, I want it sharp, precise, and intense. 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Done. The longest I've done one-to-one is 45 with a professional player. Now, parents, when it comes to youth players, they want to really hammer home and push their kid, which I understand you're paying for a service. But you have to think about their level of performance and the outcome. So the outcome is the repetition. How are they doing? So let's say you're working on a finishing activity, and the goal is to hit the bottom right corner. They've done 300 shots in 30 minutes. I'm just picking a number in a quick example. Well, their threshold of hitting that corner is going to start dropping because they're going to get fatigued. Their ability is going to, their wane, the mental capacity is going to drop, especially with younger children, it's going to happen faster. So to sit here and expect a younger child to be able to do what, say, Benji can would be completely unreasonable, and please don't ever do that. But it's important to note that 35 to 40 minutes, when he would make a mistake, we would redo the rep very quickly. And you can see on my social media, so whether it's YouTube or Instagram, for example, or even TikTok, you can see some of the sessions that I've done with professional players. They do the rep, they knock it out, they get a break. And it's usually, let's say, 5 reps in a set, and we might do 2 sets. It might be 1 set, change the activity, just depends. Now, I don't hold them to a time. So for example, if they finish the first rep, I don't say, hey, you have 20 seconds. I tell them it's on you. You tell me when you're ready, we'll go again. And I like that premise because they have to then dictate and manage themselves of how intense they want their practice to be. These are professional players though. Understand these are not kids, okay? Now I will talk about quickly double sessions because I've been asked multiple times, what's your take on a double session? A double session would be, for example, 1 session, 2 hours, and then another session 2 hours later in the day. And I do think you can do a double session. Players do it all the time. However, it's very important to get the timing right. I believe at a very bare minimum, a child especially, young player needs at least a 4-hour window break between 1 session to another session. To be honest, I don't think 4 hours is enough. I think 6 to 8, preferably 8 is enough because ideally they could go home, eat, shower, rest, right? Sleep maybe to get a good recovery in to then allow their body to go again. But also managing their workloads is very important. If they're not getting that much time, that is a fundamental problem. And I'll add to that, like with our own residency, we're club neutral, but we considered to play with the fact of doing a second session in the afternoon, say 4 o'clock. The challenge is most of the kids play club. Not all, but most. So because they play club and we're club neutral, that means they have team training sessions at night. So if we did a session in the afternoon, they would train in the morning for 2 hours. Let's say do a 30-minute to an hour session at 4 o'clock and then go to practice at 6. That's 3 sessions in a day. What would happen is their bodies would significantly start breaking, not right away, but over time. So the workload has to be managed. So we said, you know what, we're not going to do an afternoon session. We'll increase the intensity in the morning to push them more, and that way they're getting a greater challenge from the session, but then they can have the time in the afternoon to rest. That way they can go home, sleep, recover, eat, whatever, and then go to training. If they don't have training that day, they can rest longer and they get their sessions done. But that's very important background information that I think people should understand and contextually realize about the trainings. So team, no more than 2 hours. Group, hour and a half. Group is 2 to 6 players, and then a 1-to-1 is 45 minutes. If you're going to do a double session, make sure there is a minimum of a 4-hour break, preferably 8 hours. The longer break, the better. And then just to recap with the professional player Benji Michel this past week, Monday and Wednesday, Monday was a 35-minute session, Christmas Day was a 40-minute session. It doesn't need to be longer than that, guys, from my humble experience.